This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for Avoid the Maze. And the music you hear in the background is dedicated to this program by Jeff Brisbane, because we do have enough, but we have to find it in our hearts and souls. Today, my guest is Jamie Bauman. And I have to say, Jamie, that I have met so many interesting people through podcasting, people that I never would have assumed I would ever get to meet, or even think I would hobnob with them on Zoom, because so many of us, and especially women, we just don't feel like we're successful enough. Or even if we feel successful, nobody else around us is recognizing it. And I know you've lived overseas, you're back in the US, you've written a book, you encourage people to find their path, correct?
Well, I try. I mean, I had kind of a rocky path, and I don't think that's a bad thing. But now I am trying to make things a little more easier for other people who are going into the industry that I went into, because I think it's good not to tell people how to react, but to make people aware of the kind of things they're going to come across.
Absolutely.
And it's always nice to have that heads up. You know, this is possible. You may run into this. This is not unusual. So that's my idea. I don't force anybody to make conclusions, but I really think that the book I wrote will help people understand what they're in for, which I think is a great way to do it.
And and so many of us, grew up, and our family, our culture, our neighborhood sort of groomed us to be who we thought we were going to be. And I know for myself, growing up in the 50s and 60s, I had this great picture in my mind. I was going to get married, live down the street from my parents. On Friday nights, have dinner at their house. On Sunday, they were going to come to my house for brunch. And I didn't see the white picket fence, but just about everything else.
Right.
And when I got married the first time, as I look back at it, it was more of, we liked each other. It was a good relationship. Our parents told us what to look for in a mate.
You're comfortable, probably.
Yeah. And, 7 years into it, it was like, this isn't working. Then again, I thought to myself, what do I do? Because my whole life, this is what I pictured. So I even learned, at the ripe old age of 30 years old, that, you can take a new path. And it may not be perfect, but, if you don't start moving, you're never going to learn what is really what you want in life. So tell us a little bit about this book, because I'm sure it has a lot of answers to some of the things we're going to talk about today.
I don't know about that, but I want to respond to what you just said. Growing up in the 50s and 60s, and what you expected from yourself and what your family expected from you. And I was in a little bit different position than you, because I had older sisters, and my oldest sister had a hope chest that she was filling up with crystal and plates and sheets for when she got married. She didn't know the guy, but she had it. She knew what she wanted. I was 5 years younger. And by the time I graduated from high school, there was Ms. Magazine. Laura Steinem was on the front cover. She was sexy and attractive. She was motivating. So in that short span of 5 years, we went from a daughter who was collecting china to a daughter who was expected to do great things. And also, I was lucky to have open-minded parents. I remember they would go to my parents and say, "You're so lucky. You have 4 daughters. You're going to save all that money on college." Because the attitude back then was that we wouldn't go to college. And my dad is like, all my children are going to college. I mean, he had no doubt about it. So I was a little bit different position than you. So I was part of that. Just in that short time, it really was amazing how quickly things changed. It was expected that we would go to college and then figure out what we were going to do. But having steady income was what was very important. So I went to Berkeley, then I went to law school. I got a job in the government, and I enjoyed the government, but there were terms like lifer. You don't want to be a lifer. But there's a lot of comfort in the government. Now, 40 years later, I kind of wish I stayed around for the pension. Not a part. So I wanted to go to a law firm because as a lawyer, you feel that you have to be in a law firm to feel as if you made it. And I worked with partners who had videos of their sons playing tennis because they didn't have the time to go see their sons play. Right. Now, how can you be so successful that you can't afford the time to see your kids play? So I didn't like that. And then I went in-house counsel for a mortgage company, and I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the technical aspects. I enjoyed working with the business people, the advertising people, the human relations stuff. It was really a rewarding job. And overnight, we went from mortgage bankers to subprime lenders. Yep. And I looked at the numbers and I saw all the loans we were doing, and this took some time. But I realized this was not the place for me. I did not like giving 80-year-old couples loans for Caribbean vacations when they were both in wheelchairs. I mean, it was really tragic. That movie, The Big Short, I think it's called, with Brad Pitt, that was very accurate. It's like, when I watched that, it brought back so many memories, and I didn't like it. I didn't want to be in it. And I was looking for another job, and I could have gotten hired other places, but they only wanted me for my subprime experience. So I was stuck. And my parents were very adamant that I stick with it. Things will change. There's a pendulum, it goes back, and right. What would you do? And then I responded to an ad for an overseas lawyer. And it would get me completely out of it. It was something I thought I would do for 2 years, come back and see what it looked like. Give myself a break.
Sure.
And I did have kids. I didn't have a husband. I hadn't bought property. So I was pretty free to do it. So I took a job in Micronesia first. And that was an eye-opener because you realize that not everybody thinks the way we do. I mean, you just kind of imagine that the people in Micronesia think the way we do, they just look a little different or dress a little different. But cultures are so remarkably different. So it was good learning experience. And that gave me enough overseas experience to work for the big, like the World Bank, USAID, and other donors. And my next job was in Kosovo. And the book that I wrote, which is called Bike Riding to Kabul, because I actually rode a bike in downtown Kabul in 2005. It was really stupid. I wrote up all the experiences I had because everybody who's in development has stories to tell.
Sure.
Everybody has a book in them because it's fun. It's rewarding, but you come across the same kind of things that you find here at home. So if you think that you're going to escape toxic bosses, lazy colleagues, corruption, the need to have self-care, those kind of things, you are wrong because it's every bit as important. And you're going to face those issues regardless of where you are.
Absolutely.
I have a couple things. Here's me in Moscow.
I love it.
And then here's my passports.
Wow.
Crazy. So it was a really good career. It was just overseas.
It's interesting because my youngest son, for probably 10 years has been saying, I got to get out of here. I have to move to another place where nobody knows me. I can start all over again. And every time we brought it up, I said, just remember, when you move, you're taking yourself there. So you may want to figure out, is it you or the people around you? And he would look at me, he goes, oh, you just know this situation, Mom. It's not me. And for most of what he was saying was true. He took a job this past spring and it was supposed to be terrific. On paper, it was absolutely wonderful.
Right.
How could he turn it down? And he sat here with us and talked about it. And I said, hey, if you really think it's as good as what you see on paper, you don't really have a choice, do you? If you want to keep moving in your career. And he said, okay. And he took the job. And of course, it was nothing like it was on paper.
Right.
But the good thing out of all this is he, number one, realized moving away wasn't the answer because I was right. He took himself there. So he still had a vision of what he thought it was going to be. And when it wasn't, he didn't know how to cope with that. And I watched him for the 6 weeks, almost 2 months that he was there. And I finally said to him when he moved back home, I said, so tell me, what did you learn? He said, number one, as open-minded as I am, I was closed-minded.
Oh, interesting.
Really? And he said he allowed the people around him to close him off because he was trying to fit in. And he said, and he knew from day one it was toxic. And so he's been sharing that in blogging with other people, saying, look, we all could run away. We all could have, a job that pays us twice, 3, 4 times what we're getting right now. But if it's toxic, what good is the money? And as I listened to him, it was like, you're a smart young man, because I grew up going for the jobs with the money and allowing myself to feel miserable day after day. And that's what I thought work was. I thought work was misery.
Well, I've got a good story about that. I met a gal named Val, and she worked in Washington, D.C. with me. She decided that Seattle was the place for her and her husband. So she had gone out there for a conference. It was the 2 days that Seattle was sunny. It was a beautiful city. People were friendly. She loved the water, the boats. That's it. She's going to get a job. She got her husband a job out there. They moved out there, all their belongings, bought a house, and then she hated it because it rained all the time. So global warming may change that, but she realized it was not the job for her. She didn't like it. And what it came away with is that most everything can be undone. It was worth it for her to take the chance. She didn't regret it. I mean, in the sense that she went out to follow her heart.
Right.
She sized it up. She realized it wasn't for her. And because they had the finances to undo it, they undid it. And then they were happy in the sense that they came back and they figured what was wrong, just like your son.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I guess the moral of that story is you shouldn't be afraid of taking the risk. And a lot of people will say, oh, the grass is always greener. It's like, oh, save it. Give me a chance. Let me find out, what is there. And at least I've grown from that experience.
Well, and, that's something that my parents didn't understand when I started making those changes and saying,
right,
okay, I'm going to take this job, or I'm going to go take these courses. And they would look at me and they'd go, why? You have a decent job. And I'd go, you're right. It is a decent job, but you're not going to it every day from 9 to 5. I am. And I'm the type of person that takes my work home with me, whether I'm actually taking physical work home or I'm carrying it on my shoulders. And my father kept saying to me, but you do that with any job. I said, but if it was something that I really liked, it would be different. And that's what I did find at my last corporate job. For the first 8 years I was there, even though I hated the culture, I loved my job. And so I was willing to put in the effort all the time.
Right.
It wasn't until I realized that the culture was killing me. And I realized I was working 60, 70 hours a week. And if somebody said to me, I'm going to bring in lunch today, what would you like? I would look at them and say, I have no time to even think about it. And that's when my son was right. I was depressed. because all I
Right.
was doing was working because I loved the work and I didn't want to get out of that little circle, because if I did, then I had to deal with the culture around me.
You know, with my mom, I was really lucky because I did have older sisters and I could watch as the younger
Sure.
sibling,
Yeah.
the interaction. And then one day I just woke up and realized my mom knew nothing about my life. Absolutely. I mean, she knew that I went to work. She knew I was a lawyer. But as far as giving me advice, there was nothing. She couldn't weigh in on anything really because she'd never been a single adult. She never lived by herself. She never really made her, I mean, she made her own money when she was very, very young. She never used a computer. So my mom, it was really fortunate for me that I woke up, and as much as I loved her, she was a wonderful person and always had my interests at heart. She had no idea how to give me advice except be a good person, be honest, be kind to other people. All those were welcome. But as far as career choices, staying in a career, changing jobs, I would consult her and then discount whatever she said. So I was kind of lucky, but it
Sure.
was because I had the perspectives of seeing how she counseled my older sisters, and not that she was wrong, I'm going to say, but my sisters took some advice they probably shouldn't have taken. So
Yeah. And I think that happens in all families to some
Mhm.
degree. Um, they say that as a parent, you have nothing to teach you how to parent. I mean, there's lots of books out
Agreed.
there, but you know, if your child isn't acting a certain way that's written in the book, well, then what do I do now?
Right.
And um, I'll never forget when my oldest was born. Um, Within 12 hours, they thought he had meningitis. So they rushed him to the neonatal at the Children's Hospital. And there I am lying in bed asking for my baby. And I'm being told, doctor will come in and see you soon. It was like, oh my God, what does this all mean? And um, it turns out he didn't have meningitis. So for those of you listening, he was absolutely fine. He was a forceps birth and it wasn't recorded. So his soft spot was enlarged from the
Oh my
forceps
gosh,
birth.
but how frightening.
Yes, absolutely. So I was getting mad because the doctors weren't coming to get me and tell me anything. So I got out of bed and I went into the bathroom. I washed up. I found my clothes, walked to the nurse's station, and I said, I'm leaving here. I understand that my baby is at a different hospital. I need to go now. And they looked at me and they said, oh, honey, go lie down in bed. You'll be fine. And I said, oh, no, you're not honeying me. Um,
Right.
and in the meantime, they told my husband at the time, don't go get her. You stay with your baby, leave her in the hospital. And he
Right.
listened. So very early on, I started realizing that I had to find my voice. Didn't find it all the time, but when
Mhm.
it's really, really important, you
Right.
have to find your voice. Now, at that same situation, all my mother said to me was, just relax, take a deep breath, go take a nap. It was like, are you serious? I have a child that could be very, very ill.
But that's just the point.
Yeah.
She couldn't counsel you at that point.
She knew nothing different. Absolutely. Because
And
like she
everybody
said,
refers to doctors.
yeah. And my mother said when she had me and my two older brothers, she said she doesn't remember getting to really see us for almost 24 hours. She had to
Right.
lay in bed
Right.
and then she had to have her, bowel movement to say that she was okay. And then she had to be washed up and then they brought her the baby and it was like, oh, so that's where you were coming from. That's
Right.
what you knew. You didn't know what else is going on today.
I mean, there's a lot to learn from the past, no question about it. I'm not discounting that, but I really had to stop listening to her in the kindest way I could, because she couldn't. She like when I would talk about taking a job in Bangladesh or Ukraine, or it was beyond her
Absolutely.
that someone would pay me to get on a plane to give them legal advice. I mean, she thought I was a spy. I spent a lot of years trying to convince her that I was no, and then it was like, forget it. All right, I'm a spy. I think she kind of liked that. But so the book also has weaved into it. My father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's right around the first chapter, which is in Kosovo, and how even though he was failing and even though he wasn't a strong mental presence during those 10 years, the book covers 10 years, the strong moral compass that he gave me in the beginning when I was growing up kept me going through all these issues that arise during the various chapters. Like, do you stay in a situation where you have a toxic boss, or do you pull yourself out of it and move on when you know you're not going to be able to make a change?
Right.
When you find yourself where there's corruption, I mean, do you just say, well, that's part of the culture? Do you not participate? Do you turn that blind eye? And it was nice because he, even though he couldn't talk to me the way he did when I was younger, he had given me enough that I was able to maneuver a lot of these really difficult situations based on those solid human principles that we all hope that we can exercise.
Absolutely.
So I really enjoy that part of the book.
So what made you actually write the book? Because I agree with you. We all have a book inside of us.
Me
Some of
too.
us can actually sit down and really create it. Others of us, we, like myself, I've started it. I can't tell you how many times I've gone back to it. Um, it's just never the way I want it. And so it's there. I mean, there will be a memoir, if nothing else, for my family to understand things.
Right, right.
But I don't have that driving passion to write a book. And I think sometimes you have to. Is that what you had?
Well, first of all, I've always had these stories. The stories are interesting. They're in exotic locations. I'm dealing with people who are local. We have different mindsets. The issues that come up are very important. I was twice in Afghanistan, once in 2005, and again with the Obama surge in 2010, and witnessing how we were moving forward with reform and what was right and what was wrong, and how you're sort of in a really difficult situation and you want to make the best of it. You really, really do. So I always had these interesting stories, or people told me they were interesting. And of course, COVID came up. And when so many of my friends were locked down, I started writing up the stories, and my friends would read them and say, oh, I like this, and they thought it was enjoyable. And as these stories came together, somebody read it, said, oh, this would be a really good book to read on the toilet because you have these vignettes. I'm like, oh, well, that's not the book I was intending to write.
Right.
So that's when I had the passion. It's like I knew I had the stories there, and it was a matter of really massaging it and becoming a writer. Now, I talk with a lot of writers, and they talk about their craft. They talk about, this and like how they go about the process. This was just luck, how well it came together. I mean, I had really good friends who were home looking for things to do, and I lucked out with that. The stories themselves were always interesting, but putting them together was very, very difficult. I will say one thing I learned. When I told people I was writing a book, they would go, But now, if anybody comes to me and says, I'm writing a book, I'm like, great. What's it about? Tell me the premise. I mean, who's your audience? I'm enthusiastic for them because that is the same thing. It was crushing my enthusiasm for something I wanted to do.
Absolutely.
And maybe they didn't mean it that way. Maybe they were trying to help me avoid disappointment or whatever, but that's not their place. Okay. If you don't want to hear about my book, I understand that completely. Let's talk about something else. But to discourage someone to take something like that on, that's the last thing you need. So I like I said, now I encourage, and I offer to help because so many people help me.
And it's interesting. And I love that you brought that up, that oftentimes when we tell other people of something that we're going to do, instead of being excited for us, they look at us like, really? Why would you want to do that?
That's exactly what I got.
So one of the things that, and I created it for myself, and there may be other people out there doing it, but I realized that most of the people that I interview on Avoid the Maze are coaches. They are individuals who have written a book, they've left corporate America, or they're in the process of leaving corporate America. They're trying to find the right niche for themselves. And in
Right.
doing that, they've worked with a coach. Now they've taken the training to coach. And I started then running into individuals who were saying to me, I really would like to find a good life coach. And I'd say, well, I've got this database of coaches,
Yeah.
hey, go listen to my, the podcast. And then I thought, no, I can do that, but I'm going to ask some very specific questions. Why are you looking for a coach? Are you looking for it because it's the in thing to do? Because if so, don't waste somebody's time.
There's a lot of coaches on LinkedIn.
Yes, absolutely. And so what I started doing, I created this, and I'm still creating, will be an ongoing creation. But when people contact me, I'm listening to what they are looking for to change. Then I'm going through my database and I'm giving them 3 or 4 names to contact. But I'm also asking them to go back and listen to the podcast those individuals were on. So you get a feeling for who they are.
Oh, that makes sense.
And then I say to them, then contact them. And anything that develops from them is between me and the coach. Those individuals have been vetted. And it makes me feel good because I don't want to be a coach. Okay. Because I would take on everybody's issues on my shoulders and it would be too hard for me.
Yeah, I can see that in you.
But hearing that people, I'm right now working, I think, with 6 different coaches, and they all intertwine amongst themselves as well. And I have found it has been so helpful for me because I've made changes that I kept thinking, well, why isn't it happening faster? It's not going to. It's just taken me a long time to start to make those changes. So I have to learn to take that deep breath and say, okay, so I'm not perfect today. So I took a right turn when I was supposed to take a left turn. I know how to get back to the left. Why not do it that way? But in my past, that's not what would have happened. I would have turned right and I would have said, oh, guess I got to go down this way. God knows how long I'm going to be going down on the right side. And until I saw the next fork in the road, I wasn't going anywhere other than straight.
When you mentioned that whole coaching, when I was writing the book, I was very careful not to force any conclusions on somebody, which is an easy thing to do when you write a book. And it's sort of expected, we were doing this and we wanted this to happen, and we forced it. It's kind of like, for example, there's a situation where I'm in Afghanistan at the US Embassy, and I'm with a group of Afghans because I'm working for a ministry, and we're trying to get a law passed. And the US Embassy has come out against it, right? And we're trying to find out why. So the guy we're speaking with says, have you ever heard of the golden rule? And we're like, enlighten us. And he goes, the golden rule is he who has the gold makes the rule. Now we're in Afghanistan trying to establish a democracy. We've got a group of Afghan lawyers. They're trying to learn how to negotiate with a representative of the US government. Sure. Now, some people read that passage and they go, of course, the golden rule, the new golden rule, or if we're paying for it, we should decide what happens. I don't take that position. I think we were there to train people to move democracy forward. But it's interesting to hear the two sides, and they both feel that they're right. But in the book, there's no conclusion. I mean, it's a point to talk about because I don't feel like I could coach through the book, but I definitely could raise the issues that you're going to have to consider. Very, very difficult issues. And people are going to feel very strongly on each side.
Just thinking of my family dynamics. In my first marriage, I was never right. And I believed it. I really did. Believed it for a long time.
That relationship.
And even when I met my current husband, we were just married 38 years last week. There's so many times that I still, think I'm hearing him telling me I'm not right. And
Right.
but when I repeat it, he'll look at me, I'll go, no, that's not what I said. Let's start all over again.
Mhm.
And that's been our conversation for the last 38 years. It's you're not wrong. Those are your thoughts, your feelings. Um, and it comes from old, tapes in your head, plus something new that you may have just learned walking down the street.
Mhm.
And I'll look at him even to this day and go, I'm really not wrong. I just have a different way of looking at things. And,
Right.
um, you know, I think that's what the tough part is in our society, that we so want to be the one with all the answers. And I never have wanted to. I just didn't want to have the wrong answers. So I
Right.
learned
Exactly.
I learned not to speak up sometimes. But then as I matured, I guess I could say, and realized that, you know what? I don't have to look like my classmates anymore. Okay. I can be me. I can think the way I need to think. But I want to hear what you have to say as well. Because you know what? Maybe I'll start to believe that way. And I'm not asking you to convince me. I just want to hear everything that there is out there.
I actually have a story about that as well. I was in Rwanda working on the credit bureau, and we have credit bureaus here, TransUnion.
Right.
So they're really important for lending. All right. And so I went in and there was a plan, and the plan wasn't particularly good. It wasn't very advantageous. It was expensive. And so they had a company from South Africa promoting this very expensive structure. And so I went around, I talked to all the banks, and I'm like, so are you supporting this? And they're like, anything the country wants, anything President Kagame wants. It's like, we're behind it. We're here for the country. And you're like, wow, that's amazing. But it was too expensive. It would have put some of the lenders out of business. So I felt confident enough about it, but I didn't feel that I could go head to head with the
Sure.
company. So I literally spent 6 months writing requests for information, stalling, stalling, stalling. Now, that 6 months where I wrote maybe 1,000,000 words worked perfectly, because during that time, some of the CEOs of the banks and lenders changed, and they're like, oh no, that's too expensive. It was just a matter of taking the time and waiting for my right opportunity. And at the end, it still looked like it wasn't going to go the way I thought it should. And I walked to the banking association and I showed them the numbers. And the banking association said, it's too expensive. And then they were the ones who went and did the confrontation, and they got the right credit bureau they wanted. But if I had been younger, if it had been 10 years before, I would have charged into that and I would have blown it. I would have been that zealot, and which is never a good thing to do. Even if you're right, a zealot is not a way to approach things. So I was just lucky that by that time that particular issue came up, I had the maturity and the experience to back off and let things settle for a little bit. I wish I'd learned that when I was 20.
Well, and it's interesting because there probably was a good reason that you didn't know it when you were younger.
Oh,
And I really I definitely believe that, because I know when I went to college, my parents wanted me to be a teacher. I said, no way. And they said, yes, if we're going to pay, that's what you're going to go get a degree in. And they
right.
didn't see what classes I was taking. And so I took the associate's class for communications. So when I
Oh,
finished my associate's degree, they were livid with me, because if you went to school and got your teaching degree, you probably would have gotten your MRS as well, and we wouldn't have to pay anymore for you.
ouch.
Yeah, and they didn't say it quite that way, but that's what I
Sure.
was reading. Um, but some of the mistakes I made along the way, I'm so glad I did, because I understood um, better with each one what I needed to do. I
Right.
also knew better raising my two boys that I'm not going to tell you. I didn't tell my oldest son not to go into law. In fact, he wanted to go into politics, and I sat there and was shaking in my boots. But if that's what he really would have wanted to do, that's his choice.
Right.
Same for our youngest. He loves music and he loves sports, and he's been working for Major League Baseball for the last couple of years, and it's it's what he loves. He doesn't care how much money he makes. I
Uh-huh.
mean, it would be nice to make more money, as he said, but just being at the ball field, even in the middle of the winter when the
Mhm.
tarp is down, he's happy. But previous jobs to that, he would have done exactly like you said. If he didn't like something, oh, he would have just barged in and
Right.
told you you're all wrong. Now he contemplates and knows, I'm talking to this person. I have to tone it down. I'm talking to this guy over here. Yeah, I can be a little bit more explicit. And I think that's what we learn in our youth as we grow older, that, you know what? I learned what I shouldn't be doing, or I've learned how to do it in a different way that I get the success that I need.
Well, in the beginning of my career, there was this encouragement that you speak up in a meeting. You're the only woman in a meeting. So you got to speak up. You got to be heard, on and on and on. And so you try and you find yourself sounding very shrill. And that's bad too. You know, that's worse than the so it's a balance that comes with experience, maturity.
Right.
I just wish I had had that maturity and experience earlier.
Absolutely.
I'm
Well,
sure some of the people I work with said the same thing.
so how can our listeners find your book? Because it sounds like it's going to be fascinating to read. And I think we're all going to learn something from it as well.
You know what? It's a joyful book. It talks about the fun of being overseas, but it also talks about the challenges. And I will say this, my friends who have read it are still speaking to me.
Well,
No,
that's a good idea. That's wonderful.
they don't avoid me when they see me, you know, like but that's and it's got a couple of really good reviews. It's going to be out in September. I'm going to have a website, www.jamiebowman.com. It's called Bike Riding in Kabul, and there's only one of them, which is really nice. The original title was going to be Foreign Affairs or Foreign Relations, but once we thought about bike riding in Kabul and that, you know, how dumb that was to take a bike out and ride, it stuck and I love it. It reads like a novel. And that was important to me because a lot of international development books are textbooks. You know, this, the
Right.
UN, they do this, the Department of State does this, and it's kind of dry. So I did my best to, like, you know, I've got a boyfriend in there and he's like through all the chapters. We talk about my dad, we talk about friends. So when I worked in Southern Sudan, I lived in a tent for 12 months, which was insane. Nobody told me about the tent before I signed the contract. That was an afterthought. So it's fun and it's lively. And if you like to travel, you know, you get enough of the areas. It's places you probably won't go: Afghanistan, Bangladesh, you know, Rwanda, Kosovo. So you'll get a perspective on what's going on there and what the U.S. does overseas as far as helping countries develop their legal frameworks. And as dull as that sounds, it actually is a pretty interesting read.
I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, you're so sweet.
Because, you know, I don't know about the rest of our listeners, but I sometimes find that I get stuck in a rut when I start reading. Um, you know, I'll pick up something that's really very dry.
Mhm.
Um, and I'll be reading it and going, okay, I'm getting all these facts, but what do these
Right,
facts mean to me?
right,
And then I'll get, you know, another person who will recommend a book, and I'll start reading and going, you know, I don't have to read this from front to back. I can just open it up,
right.
and wherever I land, I'm going to learn something. And I don't know, I find that because I'm recording most of the day and I'm working on computers all day long, by the time the evening comes along, if it's not audible, as soon as I read the first page, I am out like a light. Audible, I can stay awake and get a couple chapters in, which I think is
Right.
exciting for
People
me.
love Audible.
Yeah.
They're
Pardon?
all talking about it. I
Yeah.
follow the websites on the author books,
Yeah.
the book websites, and yeah, Audible is everything.
Absolutely.
So,
Well,
but
I
it's a
want to
perfect.
thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I had a terrific time. Thank you.
And how else can our listeners find you if they want to get more information?
I'm on LinkedIn, Jamie Bowman, international legal consultant, international woman of mystery. I'd love to put that on LinkedIn. That would be fun. I have a website. I mean, I'm also on Facebook under Jamie
Okay.
Bowman. So, and I'm going to have an author website as well. So,
Well, we'll put all that in the show notes so that those of you who are listening, if you say, "Ugh, I already forgot," don't worry about it. It'll be there. And I look forward to having you on once the book is out, and then we can actually talk about the book and what I've read. I would love that.
oh my God, I appreciate it so much. And thank you. And thank you for your show. It's
Oh,
really great.
absolutely. Thank you. Have a great day now.
Take care
Bye-bye.
now. Bye.